He called my life's work boring and dusty. He stole it, along with my life savings, to build a new life with a more glamorous woman. He thought I was a helpless relic he could leave behind in the past, a footnote in his grand story. What he didn't know is that in my world, the past always has a way of catching up with you. My name is Dr. Anya Sharma, and I live my life in the quiet, dust-moted space between the present and the past. For 12 years, my world has been the hushed, climate-controlled halls of the Atherton University Special Collections Archive. It's a place that smells of aging paper, leather bindings, and the faint, clean scent of preservation chemicals. To most, it is a silent library of the dead. But to me, it is a vibrant, living ecosystem. I am an archivist, a historian. I don't just handle documents. I listen to them. I speak the language of faded iron gall ink, of brittle rag-based paper, of the faint, spidery handwriting that whispers stories across centuries. My colleagues call me meticulous. My students call me a perfectionist. My fiancé, Julian, used to call me his brilliant, dusty little relic. He meant it as a term of endearment, or so he claimed, a charming little joke about my chosen profession. Julian lived in a world of blinding, polished light, a universe away from my own. He was a rising star in the cutthroat sphere of private equity, a man who saw history not as a story to be preserved, but as an underperforming asset class. He spoke in a rapid-fire dialect of quarterly earnings, market disruption, and leveraged buyouts, while I spoke of provenance, palimpsests, and the chain of custody. He wore tailored Italian suits that cost more than my first car. I wore comfortable cardigans with reinforced elbow patches that were practical for leaning over ancient manuscripts. I remember one evening I was a guest at his firm's annual gala, held in a glass and steel skyscraper that felt like a different planet. Julian, ever the charming host, introduced me to his managing partner. "Charles," he'd said with a wide, effortless smile, "this is my brilliant Anya. She keeps the past in order so people like us can build the future." He said it with a wink, as if we were all in on the joke that my work was a quaint, harmless preamble to his important, world-changing deals. I smiled politely, but inside I felt a familiar, quiet sting. He didn't see my work as important. He saw it as scenery for his own life. Our love story, like many of the questionable documents I have debunked in my career, was a convincing forgery. I can see that clearly now, with the painful clarity of hindsight. He was impossibly handsome, relentlessly charismatic, and he pursued me with a single-minded focus that I, a woman more comfortable with books than with people, mistook for genuine passion. He loved the idea of me, the quiet, fiercely intelligent academic who made him seem deep and thoughtful by association. I, in turn, was dazzled by his confidence, his easy charm, and his effortless navigation of a social world that had always felt alien to me. I thought we were a perfect complementary pair. I was the substance, he was the style. I was the history, he was the future. I was the anchor. He, I thought, was the sail. The betrayal, when it came, was not a loud, messy explosion but a quiet, clean, and efficient theft, executed with the ruthless precision of a corporate takeover. I had just spent 6 grueling but exhilarating months curating a new acquisition for the university, the Blackwood Collection. It was a small, unassuming portfolio of 18th century mercantile letters, seemingly minor documents detailing shipping routes and textile trades between London and the continent. To the untrained eye, they were dry, academic, and monetarily worthless. But I knew better. I had spent weeks authenticating them myself, my heart pounding with the thrill of discovery. The paper, the ink, the unique watermarks, the faint, spidery handwriting, they were a perfect, untouched window into a lost world. They were, to a historian, a priceless treasure. And I, in a moment of naive intimacy, had made the grave mistake of sharing my excitement, my detailed research, and my professional valuation with Julian. I came into work on a crisp Monday morning, coffee in hand, ready to begin the next phase of cataloging. I keyed in the code to the primary vault, the heavy door swinging open with a familiar, satisfying sigh. But when I reached the climate-controlled shelf where the collection was housed, there was only an empty space. Void. My breath caught in my throat. The Blackwood collection was gone. A single folded note was left in its place, the paper a crisp, modern bond that felt like a sacrilege in that hallowed space of antiquity. The note was not even in his handwriting. It was printed from a computer, cold and impersonal. "Anya," it read. "I'm sorry it had to be this way. I've found someone whose ambitions align more with my own. The letters are an investment in my new future. Consider them my severance package. Don't try to find me. You're a brilliant woman, but this world is out of your league. Stick to your books." The casual cruelty, the patronizing dismissal. Out of your league. It was so perfectly, purely Julian. I felt the blood drain from my face, a cold rush that left me dizzy. I stumbled back to my office, my hands shaking so violently I could barely unlock my computer. A quick check of my online banking confirmed the rest of the violation. Our joint savings account, the one containing my entire life savings and the inheritance my parents had left me, was empty. Over $200,000, vanished into the digital ether. He had taken my past, the priceless letters, and my future, my financial security, in one single devastating act of betrayal. He had left me with nothing but my work. He thought my work was my weakness, a quaint and powerless hobby. He was about to learn that it was my weapon. The first 24 hours were a suffocating fog of shock and a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I did what I was supposed to do. I spoke to the university administration, my voice a hollow echo in the polished boardroom. I spoke to the local police, sitting under the harsh fluorescent lights of the station, feeling like a specimen under a microscope. The reporting officer, a well-meaning but jaded man named Detective Miller, took my statement with a weary sigh. "Ma'am," he said, clicking his pen, "your fiancé empties a joint account and takes some old letters after a breakup. From a legal standpoint, proving criminal intent here is difficult. He had access. It sounds more like a nasty divorce than a grand theft." I tried to explain the historical significance, the cultural value, but his eyes glazed over. "We'll put out a bolo," he said, using the acronym for Be on the Lookout. "But honestly, he's probably long gone. These things rarely get solved." I walked out of the station feeling utterly alone, realizing that the system was not equipped to understand, let alone fight, the battle I was facing. That night, sitting alone in my silent office, the initial storm of emotion passed, and something else took its place. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something more familiar, something that stirred in the deepest parts of my academic soul. It was the quiet, focused thrill that comes at the beginning of a difficult, seemingly impossible research project. My heart, which had been hammering with panic, slowed to a steady, rhythmic beat. My mind, once clouded with tears, became sharp and clear as glass. Julian saw me as a dusty relic. He was about to get a PhD-level lesson in history. My lab, my sanctuary, became my war room. He thought the Blackwood collection's value was in the letters themselves. He would try to sell them, probably through a discreet, high-end auction house in London or Geneva. He would use a fabricated story of their origin, a fake provenance, to legitimize them, likely claiming they had been discovered in the dusty attic of some forgotten English country manor. He believed that because the letters were obscure, no one would be able to challenge his story. But Julian, for all his business acumen, was a rank amateur when it came to history. He saw the text on the page, but he was blind to the story of the page. He didn't understand that every document has its own biography, its own hidden scars. And I knew something about the Blackwood collection that no one else in the world did. Something I had discovered during my initial authentication, a tiny, almost imperceptible detail that I had noted in my private research logs but had not yet included in the official university catalog because I hadn't yet been able to fully verify it. In the bottom right corner of 5 of the 18 letters, hidden within the flourishes of the signatory's name, was a tiny embossed stamp, no bigger than a grain of rice. To the naked eye, It was an imperfection in the paper. But under a 50x microscope, it was revealed to be a heraldic crest, a lion rampant holding a key. It was the crest of the von Hesse family, a line of wealthy Jewish bankers from Vienna. The Blackwood collection, I had hypothesized with a surge of academic excitement, wasn't originally from London at all. It had been part of the vast von Hesse private library, one of the greatest private collections in Europe. A collection that had been systematically inventoried, seized, and plundered by the Nazis in 1938, shortly after the Anschluss. If my hypothesis was correct, the letters weren't just valuable historical documents. They were classified as stolen art. They were, in the cold, hard language of international law, Nazi loot. And anyone caught trafficking in them would face not just public disgrace and financial ruin, but serious international criminal charges. Julian thought he had stolen a treasure. In reality, he had stolen a time bomb, and the timer was ticking. My mission was no longer about simple recovery. It was about righteous retribution. But I couldn't walk into a police station with a hypothesis, no matter how well-founded. I needed irrefutable proof. I needed to build an ironclad case, a provenance so detailed and undeniable that it would detonate Julian's new life and expose him for the fraud he was. For the next 3 months I lived in the archive. I became a ghost myself, haunting its silent corridors long after everyone else had gone home. I slept on a small cot in my office, my world shrinking to the glow of my computer screen and the smell of old paper. I survived on black coffee and the cold, burning fire of my resolve. This was my battlefield, and these historical records were my arsenal. I started with the von Hesse family archives, most of which were now housed at the Yad Vashem Research Center in Jerusalem. I called in favors, leveraged academic contacts, and had encrypted digital copies of their entire collection flown to me. For weeks, I sat hunched over a microfilm reader until my eyes burned, painstakingly cross-referencing the family's correspondence from the 1700s, looking for any mention of an English merchant named Alistair Blackwood. Nothing. It was a dead end. I hit a wall, a frustrating week where a similar watermark led me down a rabbit hole to a different family in Prague, wasting days of precious time and leaving me feeling defeated. It was a reminder that research is not a straight line. It is a maze. The breakthrough, as it so often does in historical research, came not from the grand ledgers of kings and merchants, but from the forgotten mundane corners of everyday life, the household staff records. I found a series of letters from the von Hesse family's English butler, a man named Reginald Poole, writing to his sister back in London. In a letter dated February 1937, he mentioned his employer's most prized collection of early mercantile correspondence from the Austrian trade routes, which he was helping to catalogue in his spare time. My heart leaped with such force it felt like an electric shock. He described the letter's unique paper and the spidery script of the author. It was them. The next step was the forensic deep dive. Julian thought the letters were valuable. I knew their real value was in their physical makeup. I still had the high-resolution spectral analysis scans I had performed during my initial authentication. Using the university's advanced imaging lab, a place Julian had once called Anya's playroom, I began to analyze the chemical composition of the ink. The Blackwood letters were written in a standard iron gall ink, common for the period. But under spectrographic analysis, I found trace mineral deposits of copper and zinc in the ink on 3 of the letters, trace deposits that were unique to a specific iron mine in the Austrian Alps. A mine whose entire output, according to historical mining records I unearthed, was purchased by a single Viennese stationer from 1750 to 1790. The very same stationer who, according to their surviving ledgers, supplied all the paper and ink for the von Hesse family estate. It was the kind of detail only a specialist with a borderline obsession would ever find. It was a microscopic made in Vienna sticker. The final, irrefutable piece of the puzzle was the paper itself. The faint watermarks were standard for the period. But it was the paper's chemical composition that told the real story. Using non-destructive X-ray fluorescence, I detected a minuscule trace of linen rag content that had been treated with a specific chlorine bleaching process, a process that was pioneered by, and exclusive to a single paper mill in Vienna in the mid-18th century. The Blackwood letters weren't English. They were Austrian. They were von Hess property. I compiled my research into a 200-page dossier, complete with spectrographic charts, translated letters from the butler, historical maps, and a meticulously detailed timeline. It was the most important and rigorous work of my life. It was a scholarly masterpiece, and it was a weapon of absolute, undeniable destruction. Now, for the delivery system. I knew I couldn't be the one to break the story. My involvement would muddy the waters, making it look like the revenge of a jilted lover. The revelation had to come from an unimpeachable, independent source, a third party with an international reputation for investigative journalism in the art world. I found her in a byline for the New York Times. Elena Petrova, a tenacious Pulitzer-winning reporter famous for exposing art fraud and tracking down stolen masterpieces. I created an anonymous, heavily encrypted email account. I sent her a single, tantalizing message. I have definitive scientific and historical proof that a major European auction house is about to unknowingly sell a collection of stolen Nazi art. The provenance they have been given is a sophisticated forgery. The real story is better than you can imagine. Interested? I attached a single page from my dossier, the spectrographic analysis of the ink with my annotations. To a layperson, it was meaningless gibberish. To an expert like Petrova, it was a siren's call, an irresistible puzzle. Her reply came in under an hour. It was 2 words. I'm in. I didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks later, a press release from a prestigious London auction house, Devington's, sent a ripple of excitement through the art world. They announced the surprise discovery of the long-lost Blackwood collection, describing it as a perfectly preserved treasure of English mercantile history. The collection, they gushed, was to be the centerpiece of their upcoming winter auction. The estimated value was set at a staggering £2 million. Julian wasn't just aiming for a small score. He was aiming for the stratosphere. I saw his new girlfriend, a vapid heiress named Chloe, quoted in a society magazine, gushing about Julian's brilliant and intuitive eye for historical artifacts. I watched it all unfold from my small university office, a quiet puppet master pulling strings from across the ocean. I saw the online catalog go live, with its glossy high-resolution photos of my letters and its beautifully written, entirely fraudulent provenance tracing them back to the dusty attic of an English aristocrat. Julian had been thorough, I had to give him that. But he had built his perfect, glittering story on a foundation of sand. The auction was set for a Tuesday. On the Sunday before, Elena Petrova's article landed like a bomb on the front page of the New York Times Arts section. The headline was explosive. A dark provenance. London auction house to sell lost letters traced to Nazi loot. The article was a masterpiece of investigative journalism, laying out my research with devastating, undeniable precision. It detailed the ink analysis, the paper composition, the butler's letters, the hidden von Hess family crest. It didn't just suggest the provenance was fake. It proved it, scientifically and historically. It painted a picture of a seller, an unnamed American financier, who was either a colossal fool or a calculating criminal. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The art world went into a collective frenzy. Devington's auction house was engulfed in a firestorm of scandal. By Monday morning, their stock had plummeted by 30%. The auction was, of course, cancelled immediately. The Art Loss Register officially listed the Blackwood collection as stolen property with ties to Nazi plunder. The von Hess family's lawyers filed an international injunction, and the story was picked up by news outlets around the globe. But the final, most satisfying blow came on Monday afternoon. I was watching a live news feed from London on my computer when I saw it. A stunned and terrified Julian, looking nothing like the confident tycoon he pretended to be, was being escorted out of his 5-star hotel in Mayfair by 2 grim-faced agents from Scotland Yard's Art and Antiques Unit. He was being arrested for conspiracy to sell stolen property of historical significance. His heiress girlfriend was nowhere in sight. His face, broadcast across the world, was a mask of pure, uncomprehending panic. He looked directly into the news camera, and for a fleeting second, I felt as if he was looking right at me, the dusty little relic from 7,000 miles away who had just dismantled his entire world, not with threats or violence, but with a bibliography. The legal storm that followed was immense. Julian, facing extradition to Austria to face charges for trafficking in stolen cultural property, confessed everything in a desperate attempt to get a lighter sentence. The scandal ruined Devington's, and several of its top executives were fired. Julian, the man of style, was sentenced to 7 years in a European prison. He lost everything, his money, his reputation, his freedom. 3 months later I flew to Vienna. In a quiet, wood-paneled room at the Ministry of Culture, I met Sarah von Hesse, the 80-year-old granddaughter of the man who had built the original library. She was a frail woman with eyes that held the weight of a century of sorrow and survival. With my own hands, I placed the portfolio containing the Blackwood collection on the polished table in front of her. She opened it, her wrinkled, trembling fingers tracing the spidery handwriting of her ancestors. She looked up at me, tears welling in her bright, intelligent eyes. She shared a memory of being a little girl, hiding under a grand desk in the library while her grandfather read from these very letters. His voice a low, comforting rumble. "They took the paintings, the silver, the furniture," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But these were his voice. My grandfather's passion. For 80 years we thought these were lost to the fire. You have not just returned some papers to my family, Dr. Sharma. You have returned a piece of our soul." In that moment, I felt a sense of purpose and peace that was more valuable than any auction price. My revenge wasn't just about destroying Julian. It was about restoration. It was about using my skills to correct a historical injustice, to make something right in a world full of wrongs. I returned to Atherton not as a victim, but as a quiet hero in the esoteric world of archival science. The university, thrilled with the international prestige my work had brought, promoted me to head of the entire Special Collections Division. I received a substantial grant to fund my research, which I immediately used to create a new program dedicated to identifying and repatriating stolen historical artifacts from collections around the world. My first act was to establish a partnership with the Von Hesse Foundation. Sometimes when I am working late in the quiet stillness of the archive, surrounded by the ghosts of the past, I think of Julian. I don't feel anger anymore or even pity. I just feel a profound sense of irony. He had mocked my life's work, my passion for the dusty details of history. He never understood that the details are where the truth is hidden. He built his life on a foundation of lies, while I built mine on a foundation of facts. And in the end, the facts always win. I learned that the most powerful weapon isn't force, but knowledge, the kind my enemy was too arrogant to see. My revenge was built on intelligence, strategy, and one little-known secret. If you believe in that kind of payback, the kind that is earned through clever planning, then I invite you to join the community here at Revenge Valley. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories just like mine. You won't want to miss the justice they serve next.